Here are the steps for installing heat-welded cap sheet membranes on a parapet. First, draw a straight line with the chalk across a field surface 150 mm or 6 inches from the parapet to mark the minimum overlap between the flashing membrane and the field surface. Embed the granules up to the chalk line. Then take the necessary measurements to pre-cut the membranes. Cut at an angle the corners of the flashing membrane that will be covered by the next membrane. Position the pre-cut membrane on the parapet in 39 inches or 1 meter wide strips. Hold the bottom of the membrane in place with your knees and fold it back towards you. Heat weld the membrane at the base of the parapet. Push the flashing membrane in place in the corner of the parapet into the hot bitumen. Use the membrane roller at the base of the parapet. Continue to heat weld the membrane upwards. Use the membrane roller over the upper corner of the parapet to avoid trapping air bubbles between the two membranes. Cut off any excess membrane at the top of the parapet if needed. Allow approximately 6 mm or 1/4 of an inch between the flashing and the end of the membrane for the bead of sealant. Pull the membrane towards you to reach your weld. Heat weld the membrane on the top of the parapet up to the metal flashing, and be sure to have a good bitumen bleed out by pressing down on the membrane with a roller or a trowel. Now go back to the base of the parapet and heat weld the junction point of the flashing membrane to the field surface. Note that the side laps of the flashing cap sheet membranes must be offset by at least 4 inches or 100 mm in relation to the laps of any membrane already installed in order to avoid any over-thickness. Here are the installation steps for the corner membranes. Fold the inside corner membrane according to the dimensions on the parapet and cut the lower corner. Install the membrane on the parapet and cut the membrane at the upper corner of the parapet. Weld the membrane following the steps shown earlier for standard flashing membranes. Embed the granules of the lap between the two corner membranes using the torch and the trowel. Apply bitumen to the corners. Then fold the second inner corner membrane and install it in place on the parapet. Cut the membrane at the upper corner. Remove the membrane and cut the lower corner as well as the overlap. Replace the membrane on the parapet and weld it following the steps shown earlier for standard flashing membranes. Always make sure that bitumen bleeds out on all membrane joints when heat welding the membranes. For the outside corner membranes, install the first membrane in place on the parapet. Cut the membrane at the lower corner and the upper corner of the parapet, as well as the excess membrane on the horizontal part. Weld the membrane following the steps shown earlier for standard flashing membranes. Using the torch and the trowel, embed the granules of the lap between the two corner membranes as well as the tip that is on the ground and the lap on the upper part of the parapet. Install the second outside corner membrane to the parapet. Cut the membrane at the lower and upper corners of the parapet. Weld the membrane following the steps shown earlier for standard flashing membranes. Cut off excess membrane with a utility knife. Once again, make sure that the bitumen bleeds out on all joints when heat welding the membranes. To complete the installation, on top of the parapet, apply sealant at the junction point of the flashing and the cap sheet. This installation is now complete.